Thank you, Harold Sensei, for hosting and presenting, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Um, Fortunately, last week you didn't have to hear me, so this week I don't have any chronology to correct. So I'm just going to jump in and introduce Harold Sensei for this talk. I'm really excited about it. We have a couple of pilots. Christina, I see you sitting there. Don't hide. And Gardner Sensei. So we've got experienced pilots that will surely comment and add to our discussion.
I'm a pilot also.
Oh, great, 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 great. Okay, well, let's see. I'm just going to start my introduction by saying a little story that I don't think I've ever told Harold Sensei, but it has to do with when we started South Carolina Key Societies back in like 1986. So Toi Sensei, I said he was very, looking after me, fatherly, and he said when I went to Furman, you don't have to. He said you don't have to start teaching right away. You need to focus on your career. You need to focus on your job, your classes, your students, the administration. So he basically kind of gave me a pass and said, don't start right away. And I'm not sure if Dan Atwater's on this call because he's going to turn to me and say, oh, well, you told me to start right away when I went to Earlham College, right, from Raleigh. So Dan, sorry. But remember when Earlham hired you, they said one of the things we like about you is the opportunity to start Aikido at Earlham College. So you didn't get the pass that I got. So anyway, I came to Furman in 1982. And so this is, shortly after the Uchideshi days. And my dissertation that I was telling you all about in detail with third, second, and first order, it finally came out in book form, The Body-Mind Experience in Japanese Buddhism. So Toi Sensei, my point is, he was happy, it was good, okay, your career's going along fine. Then 85 and 86 is when I was at Harvard. And that was putting together this book, Science and Comparative Philosophy, with Yuasa Yasuo. Now, Yuasa Yasuo was this famous Japanese philosopher. He's now deceased. And he taught at Tsukuba Daigaku. Tsukuba Daigaku is like a national planned science university. So I'm seeing Toi Sensei regularly because I'm going back and forth on this book project. And about that time, Toi Sensei says, so, Harvard's going to be done. You're going back to Furman in the fall. And he just kind of looks at me, nodding like this, kind of like giving me the heads up, like, so, like, when are you going to start, teaching? And I got the message right away. And so I immediately said, okay, Toi Sensei is saying now is the time. My career at Furman is stable. Everything's going well. And so the next question is, well, if you're seeking to start a dojo, and because of my travel schedule, that I can't be there all the time. I mean, there wouldn't be South Carolina Key Society without Harold Sensei. I'll just put it that way. Because what he allowed me to do is I would teach him something, even if it was simple as, okay, here's how you do a forward roll. Next week, here's how you do a backward roll. He would learn it, practice it, and just like Setsudo, what you learn today, you can teach another the next day. He's started teaching, literally being the definition of sensei, one step ahead in those early days, because I just wasn't around. So he really gets all the credit there. And so I started looking around. It's the fall of 1986. And actually Stone Sensei and myself and Eric, we worked out together. Eric and I played a thing called noon ball basketball together with faculty, and we would lift weights. And as I got to know Eric, he went to Furman, by the way, and he was a theater major, but he was like the star, and pardon me, Harold Sensei, because I'm going to get the words wrong, but all on the technical and the production end of theater. Eric was the star, and he learned his craft at Furman with Furman faculty being mentors to him. And right out of Furman, he became like the program director of McAllister Auditorium, which is the largest auditorium on campus. And he kind of learned his craft, where he is a real expert in lighting and theater design, anything to do with theaters and all the technology that goes behind it. He knows it. He's run the programs, he's designed the programs, he's installed the programs for theaters, you know, all over the country. So that was his profession. Well, as I got to know that, here's what I learned. He had to be an Otomo, because one night, he's the head of the whole, you know, auditorium or the Peace Center downtown in Greenville. One night you might have the Rolling Stones. Well, so you need to accommodate the artist in a certain way, the way the Stones want to be treated. But the next night could be opera. The next night could be Shakespeare. The next night could be poetry reading. And what I realized is that Eric loved to serve. He was just on top of it. So it was like, he's an Otomo in daily life already, and I haven't even taught him how to roll yet. So I'm thinking, this is the guy. This is the guy. So I started and working with him. And I want to say a couple of things here from my notes. In 1996, he was the Nage and Ileana was the Uke, but they won the first international taigi competition in Japan, what they called the World Cup. You know, Eric is short on words, so this is out of the box for him to do this today, because up there on the podium, Otsuka Sensei was making a big deal out of this. You know, these gaijins have won this thing, and he's going speech, speech, speech. So Eric, in front of everyone, says, thank you very much. That was it. And Otsuka Sensei goes, that's it? That's your speech? And it was like, yep, that's Eric. Thank you. That's about what you're going to get. So anyway, I want to share this part. Couple things. You know, here's the other thing I want everyone to know. Eric allowed me to be the good guy, and he was the strict one. So I would teach him about etiquette, you know, slippers go this way, fold it this way, you know, this is how the dojo should be prepared, blah, 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 blah. I told him one time, he processes it, and he teaches everybody. And he's strict, you know, etiquette, all that detail. So I got to be generally nice and pleasant and, you know, the fun sensei. And then he was the one that went behind me and just kind of cleaned up and made sure everyone was doing what they're doing. You know, if the dojo wasn't clean, he reminded them that paying their dues gave them permission to clean the toilets. You know, it doesn't go the other way around. And so he was just fantastic and continues to be ultra supportive. His wife, Christina, also went to Furman. She was on the golf team and was a professional golfer, and Eric traveled with her and caddied on tour with her. Then when her career was over, they moved back to Greenville. She has a sports marketing company that she founded, and she's the CEO. They have 2 children, JT and Grace, who are coming up. Well, JT is now technically a teenager, so he and Christina are just about ready to get into the teen years with their 2 kids, so good luck with that. Yeah. Christina, by the way, you're not going to know this, she was a philosophy major, philosophy and business. And so actually, I was referencing in my conversations with Toi Sensei on the Shokushu, philosophers like Nishida Kitaro. I just made a passing comment that said all Japanese people know the name Nishida Kitaro because you got to know him for the college entrance exams. It's like the only philosopher that people actually have to know. And he has this famous experience called pure experience, or this concept called pure experience, Junsui Keiken. That's very much like just trying to describe a first order mode, and Toi Sensei and I would talk about it. Well, Christina actually studied this guy, as well as I remember papers on Keiji Nishitani, Watsuji Tetsudo. It's just fun to say all these things and let you know that both Christina and Eric went to Furman. Christina made the right decision and majored in philosophy. And
business.
Yeah, business. Yeah, good thing business. Yeah. So anyway, there's my introduction. I love you, and Ileana and I are actually godparents to Christina and Eric's children. So there's a deep, loving connection here, and Eric just loves to talk. So I'll just turn it over to him right now.
Thank you, Sensei. I'm assuming I didn't mute myself. I did not. Good. So first, thank you all for coming. I don't see anyone signing in right now, so we seem to be in good shape. Everyone can hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Okie dokie. First, a couple of caveats. One, I'm a private instrument-rated pilot. I'm not a flight instructor. I'm not a professional pilot. I'm not an ATP. I am not a military pilot. We have one, at least a retired one, watching right now. So I will be very interested in hearing comments from Gardner Sensei. We have a glider pilot who's also an instructor, I believe. Is that right, Christina? Can I get a thumbs up? I believe that's right. And Mike, I don't know your background. Can you unmute and tell me just a little bit about?
Yeah, I'm a private pilot. I've actually had a plane for about 25 years. And in fact, next week, I have my instrument check ride.
Congratulations. That should be fun.
So for people who don't know, that's one of the harder ratings to get. So I've been working on that for actually a couple years now.
Yeah, it's a bear. So a little bit how I began. In 1946, my father flew an F-6F Hellcat. It was a naval fighter plane for about 50 feet. He was an able-bodied seaman, and his assignment was as an ordnance man. He wasn't supposed to be flying the plane. He was certified to taxi the aircraft around the ramp. He just got one going a little bit too fast and settled it back quickly to the ground and buttoned the plane up and very, very quickly found something to do somewhere else on the base. I don't think he was ever written up for it. And despite the fact that he could have gotten in big trouble, it didn't discourage him from his love of aircraft. He was just an avid lover of aviation. He took me to every air show that came to the area. We would go to the observation platforms scattered around the little downtown airport in Greenville. We lived here when I was a boy as well. In fact, the observation platform we used to go to is about 100 yards from the hangar where my aircraft is kept. So every time I drive to it, I think of standing up on that platform with my dad watching the aircraft take off and land. But that's probably going back just a little bit too far. So let's move forward. 1968. Jean-Claude Killy wins 3 gold medals. No, wait. That's not my story, but it really kind of is the story of how I got started flying, because you all know from Shaner Sensei that when he found out that Jean-Claude Killy did yoga, that the US Olympic ski team was all sent out seeking to understand Asian philosophy so that they could, for peak performance. So in a roundabout way, because in 1968, Jean-Claude Killy won 3 gold medals at Grenoble, I met a man named Dr. Tom Buford. And this is my wonderful flight instructor, Tom, who took up flying after the age of 63, I think, maybe 65. He was a philosophy professor at Furman, a colleague of Shaner Sensei's. A wonderful man. In fact, he was also an Aikido student for a number of years, right as we were starting South Carolina Key Society. He came to the door, and even though he was a master teacher and a longtime educator, he was the most patient of students. Sensei talked a little bit about in the early days, he would teach me something and then say, okay, I'm traveling next class, so you have to teach. I actually taught my 4th Aikido class, meaning I'd had 3 with Sensei and the 4th one I taught. So the first class with Shaner Sensei was 4 basic principles. It was outside the PAC building at Furman. He taught me 4 basic principles. He said, pay very close attention because you're going to be teaching this a lot. Please don't let anyone come on the mat to a class that I'm teaching without knowing 4 basic principles, because it's where we begin and where we end. So that was day 1, 4 basic principles. Day 2 was funakogi waza and forward rolls. We had 1 mat, and he got me to it most of the time. Class 3 was shomenuchi kiwaza and backward rolls. And then day 4 was, okay, I've got a conference in West Timbuktu, teach class. And I, of course, said, Sensei, he said, just teach what you know. So to make a short story incredibly long, Tom Buford was one of the people that had to survive the damage of my early attempts at teaching Ki and Aikido. And he was just the most patient and gracious of students and teachers. So I love and miss Tom. He died 2 years ago now. But I think of him every time I get an aircraft. So, so it was in, I think, May of 2001. We're having some celebration. Sensei, you may have to date check me on this. I imagine it was a dawn celebration for someone, and I'm sure it was at the Irashai Sushi Pub. I knew that Tom had recently become a pilot, recently in my mind, but I did not know that he'd become a flight instructor. So I said, oh, well, Dr. Buford, when do we start? He said, well, go ask Christina, and if she says yes, we'll start as soon as you like. He explained, he reminded me that it wasn't just about me. So I went home, actually on the way, drive home with Christina, asked her if it'd be okay. She said, sure, whatever. And the next week we started. It started with a little bit of ground school and just talking about aviation in general. Then we pre-flighted the plane, walking around, a little bit like 4 basic principles. You have to pay attention and try to remember. Go over the checklist, then get in the cockpit. Tom starts pointing out the different things in the cockpit. One of the first things that I noticed, Tom passed away from Parkinson's, and he was in the early stages of Parkinson's then. So when Tom would reach his hand for a control, it would shake like a leaf until he touched it. And then he was not shaking anymore. So we talk our way through the cockpit, call tower, taxi out. I get to take off the plane. If those of you that had flight instruction know that usually get to take the plane off the first time with the flight instructor, not always land it. We fly around, some easy turns, straight and level, a little sightseeing in the Greenville area, back to the airport. We land, we get out, we talk, I'm hooked. So what do we do next is my question. So we start training, going through the curriculum. Tom is just a wonderfully intentional teacher. Always a lesson plan, always an idea, a really firm grasp of what he wants to teach and how he wants to get it across. We trained through the summer, and September 11th, 2001 comes along, and we're grounded. All flight training in the United States stopped for a period of time. Mike might remember how long it was. Well, you were probably flight training then. You probably already had your license. So we stopped until they said we could fly again. You were saying something, Mike?
No, just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I already had my license then.
Eventually we got back in the air, sign off to solo, test prep, written test, oral exam, flight test, pilot. It's a lot like getting your shogun. You now have your license to learn. So flight training is really similar in many ways to Aikido training. When you get your private pilot's license, you're not necessarily good. You're good enough, but not necessarily good. So there's a lot of work to be done. I wanted to share with you something I wrote about Tom when he passed away. We were asked to submit something for his a dedication to him. So I'm going to share this with you. Wise, patient, and kind. I have known Tom since my time as an undergraduate at Furman in the late 70s. Tall, thin, silver-haired, cowboy hat and boots. While I never had him for a philosophy class, he was someone I knew from a distance. Then one day he showed up at an Aikido class. Unfailingly polite and kind, Tom was always patient with my clumsy attempts to explain something I barely understood. Despite decades of teaching, he always took a minute to express appreciation for the class. Patient and kind. Some years later, after an Aikido gathering, I learned that Tom had recently become a flight instructor. Having always wanted to learn to fly, I asked him when we could start flying. As soon as you ask Christine for permission, was his reply. It isn't just your decision. Wise. A few days later, we began. Tom's manner was calm and matter of fact. His lessons carefully planned. When we finally got in the airplane, he began pointing out the various controls. I noticed the tremors in his hands. While this might have made me nervous, his confidence and clarity were astounding. As soon as his hands touched the controls, they were rock solid. I never gave it a second thought. Tom taught me well. He taught me to be prepared, to fly precisely, nose wheel always on the center line, patterns always tight, always fly the airplane first. But he was also very patient when the standard wasn't met. He was always quick to forgive a mistake and guided me to do the same with myself. Regret is dangerous when flying, he taught me. What a remarkable, precious gift Tom gave me. Wise, patient, kind. I'm so grateful. So, thank you for letting me read that. I even got through it all. So I wanted to, again, this is not a class about aviation. It's really a class about how I view my aviation training. Oops, sorry, some people are trying to get in while I was reading that. I hope I got everyone before they got mad and went away. Anyway, we've been talking recently about 3 orders of body-mind awareness. The third order, many intentions scattered. I think Terry Sensei used the word monkey mind. Second order, singular intention. And then first order, no intention. So when you begin to fly, you know, there's just a million things. You know, the first thing you have to do is fly the plane. when you fly, there's thrust, there's drag, there's lift, there's weight. Altitude, airspeed, heading, pitch, roll, yaw, stick, rudder, throttle, mixture, prop, gear. Navigate is important. You got to know where you are. Pilotage and dead reckoning, using maps, eyes out the window. VORs, NDBs, which are navigation beacons. Instrument procedures, GPS. Communicate is the third thing that you always have to do. There's ground and tower, ATC, unicoms with other pilots, and being on the guard when you're listening, when you're not talking to anyone in particular. I fly a Cirrus SR-22. There are 73 checklists in the glove box of my, and they're also on a screen in front of me. 21 for normal procedures, 15 for abnormal procedures, 22 for emergencies, 15 performance-related checklists for getting a particular kind of performance out of the aircraft. This would seem impossible to manage, and it is impossible to manage in third order, or very difficult. But we start with these things. I guess the way that I got through it at first was a little bit like Rondori. When you talk about a checklist, it's not a checklist. The pre-flight checklist for my aircraft is 122 items. That's one checklist. Well, you can worry about it being 122 items, or you can, if you're using the checklist, you can choose to view it just like Rondori, one item at a time. There's just one, and then there's just one, and then there's just one. For me, that's how I, even though it's very third order, how I approach the checklists. I try to view them, I don't try to separate them, but I view them as singular actions. Okay? So 122 items in my pre-flight for my aircraft. But the FAA says I have to have the checklist with me. I don't necessarily, I don't read it as I go. After I'd become very familiar with the particular aircraft, the checklist comes with, and then we do what's called a flow, which is basically walking around the aircraft. When you're in a particular place, you're looking for a particular thing. So I would say it's like, we talk in terms of third order, look. Okay, when I'm doing a checklist, I read the item, I look at the thing. When I'm doing the flow, I see. So as I start at the trailing edge of my left wing, I put my hand on the fairing. That's the thing that smooths the air as it passes over the joint between the wing and the fuselage. And I tug it. And then as I move back, I check the luggage door. And I step back from the plane, and I look at the antennas on top of the plane. So there's this sort of where I am on the plane prompts me to look in a certain place. So in my mind, this is moving towards second order. It's high third order, early second order. Because I'm moving toward the idea of just one thing, which is pre-flight. Just one thing. So that's my approach. Of course, always we go back to checklist, because it's where pilots make sure that everyone stays safe, I guess you'd say. So even after the flow, back to the checklist. Taken as as separate items, it's just daunting. So maybe in simpler terms, how to turn an airplane. So you have a stick, or a yoke, which goes forward to pitch the nose down, comes back to pitch the nose up. If it's a stick, you pull it to the side, push it to the other side to roll the aircraft. And then you have two rudder pedals on the bottom, in front of you, that move the rudder on the tail, which keeps the tail behind the nose of the airplane. So when you make a turn, you roll the aircraft into the turn. You have a little, when you're first learning, you have a little airplane turn indicator in front of you with a ball on it. And they say step on the ball, because when the plane starts to skid, the ball gets out from under the tail. So you step on the ball to put the rudder in the right position to make the turn coordinated. And then if the turn is steep enough, you need to pull back on the stick. So when you're beginning with your flight instructor, it's roll, rudder, pitch. Okay. Then you begin to integrate that into, think about katate dori rotomochi kokunaya, irimi. 5 steps. How many steps is it? Many steps, 3 steps, 1 step. So, so it is roll, rudder, pitch. Then it's roll, rudder, pitch. And then it's turn is the idea. Interestingly enough, this is the first time my teacher and I started talking about how does it feel. Does everybody here know the expression, fly by the seat of your pants? If you're a pilot, you obviously do. You can actually feel when the aircraft when the aircraft is skidding or when it's turning smoothly through the air, because you feel it in the seat of your pants. And so eventually you stop thinking of a turn as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and it's just turn. And your foot does the right thing at the right time. So sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting to the right place in my notes. So I guess what I found is that I can inform my flight training with the same methodology that I use in Aikido training. Truth be known, as I was going through this this presentation, I realized that the title really is bi-directional. It's not that my key training informs my pilot training, or that my pilot training informs my key training. It's both. They're both different tools to get to the same thing. I don't know who amongst us, when you learned unbendable arm, then proceeded to walk up to every door with a panic bar at a public facility and extend your unbendable arm and walk through the door. Did anybody do that? It's got to be someone in here. Even at first, I've only been doing it for 34 years. Every time, still, unbendable arm through the door. Even my kids do it. It's kind of a family joke. So what I found is that they both inform each other. So I use this, it's not so much that I'm using key training to help my pilot training or vice versa. It's symbiotic. Really everything that I'm doing is connected to the other. So they inform each other, I guess is the point I was trying to make. That was sort of an important recognition for me, that my tenshoku, my intention, my mission, is to train, to be intentional, and to be of service. So it's not different than key training. It is the same thing. So some things that I noticed are similarities. Do the notion of fixation. We use randori, I think, to help us in our training avoid fixation. We don't want to think about just one person. We need to be able to instantly change from one thing to the next. Flying a plane is exactly the same way. You have to pay attention to everything, but you cannot become fixated on anything. Fixation is deadly. And then again, I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about was how important feel is, at least in early flying. Mike probably has been working on being a little numb to his feeling a little bit in instrument flying, because you've got to learn to ignore them and not believe what your sense of balance tells you sometimes. But a great deal of flying is just being calm and centered and relaxed enough to feel what is going on in the environment around you, so that you can keep the plane straight and level, or coordinated in a turn, or whatever else might be your task. First order of body-mind awareness, to me, is really has nothing to do with flying, or it has everything to do with it. But that's your state, not the task of flying. Flying a plane to me is a task. We strive for first order body-mind awareness, but flying a plane is a task, just like cooking dinner is a task. You can be in that state and still, it doesn't preclude you from doing tasks. It's just that your intentionality is of a different nature, I guess I'd say. So with that, has anyone sent any questions in? Does anyone have any questions or comments? I am going to unmute Gardner Sensei. I lost him. Gardner Sensei, are you there, or did I drive you off?
I'm here.
Gardner Sensei, Christina Larson just typed a great question. Ask any of the pilots how he or she got started in aviation, and you'll love to hear the story. So I would love to hear the story. Gardner Sensei, I know that you flew in the military. You've got to at least gift us with one or two stories.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, I got started actually after I got out of the Army. I started my military career in the Army. And at the end of World War II, landed on the shores of Japan about in the same year that Toei Sensei came back from China. But we didn't run into each other at that time, unfortunately. So anyway, after I got out of the Army, I started flying on my own. I found an ex-military pilot who had a little J3 Cub. And so he took on 2 or 3 students, and I was one of them. And I would go down there about once every other weekend while I was going to college, and for as much as I could afford, to fly for 30 minutes with him. And so I finally got, actually I never did get my pilot's license. But, meanwhile, I graduated from college, also from the Air Force ROTC, and they offered to send me to pilot training. So I decided that sounded like a lot more fun than pushing a slide rule for the next 30 years. So off I went. So that's really how I got into it.
Christina, what about you? Are you ever going to get a plane with a motor?
I'm sorry?
I was asking Christina how she got started. And I wanted to know if she was ever going to get a plane with a motor. And when can I have soaring lessons?
Well, my story parallels yours in some ways, Harold Sensei. My dad wanted to learn to fly, and he went and got lessons when he lived in St. Louis on an old Army Air Force base. And then he didn't get his pilot's license at that time, and I only found out recently it was because he was afraid that he would fail the license test. And
Written?
he was a smart guy, and I was really stunned to hear that he had test anxiety about it. He did go later and get his pilot's license when I was a teenager by studying with a fellow who had taught pilots to fly in World War II. But in the meantime, he did like your dad did, and he dragged me around to every air show within driving distance, including to Oshkosh on multiple occasions. And I considered military flying and then didn't, because my eyesight at that time wouldn't have allowed me to even fly a C-130. And so I just sort of shelved it. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I moved from being a lab animal veterinarian into graduate work for my PhD. And with that came some free time. And so I thought I would pursue it because I'd been gifted a flight in a glider the summer before. I didn't know gliding was a thing. And gliding was the kind of flying I always wanted to do, because you're not just flying along straight and level going from point A to point B, which when I was flying with my dad was sort of boring. You're in a little trainer, right? But when I took the gliding flight, here I am carving steep turns through the air and fly, doing hammerheads. And I'm thinking to myself, where has this been all my life? So, I didn't look back, and went and got my glider's pilot's license, and then my commercial license, and then my CFIG, and here I am.
Awesome. Well, Mike,
So, yeah, I'll happily take you for a glider ride, but right now our tow plane is under its going and getting its annual, and we're not towing it right now anyway because of the whole pandemic thing right now.
Got it. Mike, how did you start?
Well, my grandfather was a pilot. I have 2 uncles and an aunt who were pilots, but it skipped a generation. My father had absolutely no interest in aviation, but I always was interested. I'd never pass up an opportunity to go to an airport and just watch planes take off, hop a ride with someone if I could. And of course, one of my uncles took me up for a ride when I was just a little kid. But I was looking for an excuse to figure out how to make aviation part of business, flying for work, whatever. And then I realized I don't need an excuse. I can just do it for fun. And a couple of hours after I finished my last course for my graduate program, the very next thing I did was start taking flying lessons. And I got my license, and just flew for fun. And my third date with my wife was I took her out flying, flew her to an airport, went to a restaurant at the airport and flew back. And I can tell you that airplane ride is a great date when you're single. And to this day, my family loves going up. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and just yesterday they were asking me, "Daddy, when can we go up for an airplane ride?" Because lately all of my flights have been just me and an instructor, so I haven't taken the girls up that much recently. But they all love it, and it's part of your lifestyle. And everything you said about second order awareness and everything else is absolutely true.
So my daughter has been helping me. So this whole thing, I don't know if they were drinking beer or not when they came up with the idea that I should do this about aviation. And somehow Freiling Sensei and Shinner Sensei thought I was going to come up with great GoPro videos to share with everyone. So those YouTube videos take a lot more equipment than just a GoPro. So I do have, but my daughter has been helping me. So I have a video of just one pass around the pattern. Weather was terrible when I did it, so it's not going to be beautiful skies. So if you'll bear with me to stay out of hock with my daughter, I'm going to just show a video of one pass in my Cirrus, and I'll just narrate through it just for those who aren't pilots. What we're doing, and I'm waving at my daughter now, and I hope you enjoy, and thank you for your indulgence. So,
I have one question, Eric.
hi, Sensei.
What order of awareness were you in the first time you flew inverted under a bridge?
I was in first order because that's a dream of mine, maybe. And so there was no intentionality at all because I haven't done that. You may have, and I want to hear about that in a minute.
I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Grounded, right?
I'll take the fifth.
Right. All right, here we go. I don't know that I'm going to get you back. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So this is actually not from a dead stop. It was the takeoff after a touch and go, but I am calling out oil pressure, fuel flow, power showing good, airspeed is alive, and then rotate at 75. Climb out in this aircraft is 90 close to the airport with 50% flaps. Crosswind to downwind. I might have been talking over the plane telling me I'm at 600 feet, which is when you can, which is the lowest they say you can use the parachute. Trying to stay tight, 1 mile. There's my 11-year-old's hand. Isn't she cute? Throttle's coming back. We must be abeam the numbers. I think this is Grace asking me, where's our house again? It's right off the tip of the wing. It's a lot noisier than your plane, isn't it, Christina?
I don't need a headset in my aircraft to talk to my passengers.
Say again?
I said, I don't need a headset in my aircraft when I'm in a two-seater to talk to my passenger. This is kind of a treat, Haro Sensei.
Pardon me?
This is a treat.
Christina, how do you hear approach control when you don't have a headset on?
Say again?
I was just wondering how Christina heard approach control when she didn't have a headset on.
Well, I don't fly at a towered field.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Because if air traffic control tries to tell me to do airspeed, altitude, and heading, I can maybe give you 2 out of 3, maybe. So I stay out. But I have a radio.
Shinner Sensei, you're doing a great job not breaking out in a cold sweat. This is good. All right. So that was for my daughter. I know it was a little bit long. That's how long it takes to fly the pattern. Does anyone have any other questions?
When are you going to start instructing?
Well, you know, I'm almost finished with my commercial rating. And so that would be next, not so much for instructing, but for better insurance, I think. More ratings are more better.
Yeah.
Anybody that's not a pilot have any questions? Here are some prettier pictures while we let the, there we go. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
I wasn't landing it on a frozen lake. That's in your part of the world, isn't it, Christina? What buttons?
I want one.
I don't. Too many buttons. Kudos. Nice wing.
It's fast, but not very forgiving.
It's a beautiful aircraft. I love the G1000 glass cockpit. It's beautiful.
Not intuitive. I think my wife, Christina, not Christina Larson, is the photographer of note for most of these. We have family on the coast, and we're usually getting down there after work, for those that work. That was dodging they were building the thunderstorms near Tampa. There are always thunderstorms in Florida. So that's what I got. Sensei.
Thank you, Harold Sensei. That was really interesting. Yes, thank you. And thanks for weaving in, you know, how your key training, you know, affected your process of learning, or how would you describe the various stages. So I found that was really interesting. We're up on an hour, so I want to thank Harold Sensei and thank all of you for participating. We're trying to just focus on key in daily life and stay connected and talk about ways that we apply our training. And to that end, I wanted to tee up next week. I've managed to ask another colleague, in fact, colleague in a number of ways. So Dr. Mark Stone, who's on the call now, he will be teaching next week. And, you know, when I came to Furman in 1982 to the philosophy department, believe it or not, you think everyone goes to Furman that I know, but Mark went to Furman as an undergraduate. And then he went on and he fell in love with my colleagues. They were his professors, Tom Buford being one of them. And then Mark went on and received his PhD, and obviously Furman hired him back. And so Tom Buford and Mark and I, as well as others, have, you know, were colleagues in the philosophy department all those years. And Tom was the actual chair when I was hired. Probably he was the chair when you were hired too, Mark. So in any event, the title of next week's talk is going to be Drop by Drop, Inspirations from Key in Daily Life. In this session, Dr. Mark Stone Sensei, 6th Dan, will focus his discussion on Soshu Tohei's most influential book, Key in Daily Life. He will highlight some passages, images, and insights that have been transformative for him in various ways over 3 decades of dedicated training. So that'll be next Thursday, and you'll receive announcements about that. And if you have questions, please continue to email me. I'm still receiving all kinds of questions and things on Saigon. So it gives me an opportunity to emphasize it's not about Saigon. I was just trying to give you insights into, what are the seeds and the framework behind Toi Sensei's thinking. So in any event, I still appreciate all these details since I love the text and it means a lot to me. So Harold Sensei, kudos. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sensei. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining. I do appreciate it very much. And I do love to be able to see your faces and connect with you. And thank you so very much.